What's up guys, it is Mike from Mana Hoarders. In this video we're bringing you a commander deck tech for a Bant commander, Chulane, Teller of Tales. You can cast Chulane for 2, a green, a white, and a blue. He is a 2/4 human druid with vigilance. His text reads, whenever you cast a creature spell you can draw a card, then you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. You can also pay 3 and tap him to return target creature you control to its owner's hand. The final price for this build came in at $104.83. Now do bear in mind that a lot of these prices will vary greatly depending on the vendor you use, the quality of the cards you purchase, and a variety of other factors. I would rate this current deck at around a 6 or 7 out of 10 on the power scale. Now I do realize that Chulane is an extremely powerful commander and can push even the upper tiers of the power level with an optimized deck. Now as far as what we want to do to win with this deck is we want to play plenty of cards that draw a lot of value whenever we cast creatures, much like Chulane will draw value from that same ability. Also, we want to have cards that trigger from landfall, since we'll have a lot of lands cheated out on the battlefield, and give us a little bit extra benefit due to all the massive card draw generated from our commander. Now let's go ahead and dive into the deck. First up are our lands. Now we are running 40 lands in this deck, which may seem a bit extreme, but realize if you're able to go off with Chulane on 1 or 2 turns, it is not uncommon to untap with 20 to 30 lands, pretty much putting a lock on the game. Now with that in mind, we will have Azorius Guildgate, will allow us to tap for a blue or a white. We have a Bant Panorama, which we can sacrifice to tutor for a forest, island, or a plains. Selesnya Guildgate, Simic Guildgate, Thornwood Falls, and we are also running 12 basic forests, 12 basic islands, and 11 plains. Next up are our artifacts. First up is Bontu's Monument. Now, I realize that some people will look at this card and think that it does not fit. However, this second block of text, whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, is absolutely devastating in a deck that really wants to cast creatures as quickly as possible. For 2 and a white, we can cast a Mace of the Valiant. It's an equipment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to put a charge counter on Mace of the Valiant. Then the equipped creature is going to get +1/+1 for each of those charge counters and have vigilance. This means we have a bunch of creatures enter the battlefield. If we put this on one of our creatures that has some sort of evasion, we can absolutely destroy an opponent with 1 solid strike. For 3 generic mana, we can cast Oketra's Monument. It's going to make white creature spells we cast cost 1 less, and whenever we cast a creature spell, we're going to get a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. And for 3, we also have Rhonas' Monument. Green creature spells will cost 1 less, and whenever we cast a creature spell, target creature we control will get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. And for 1 mana, we can cast Soul Ring. We'll tap to add 2 generic mana to our mana pool. Next up are our sorceries. We have 4 in total. Helping us ramp, we have Cultivate. For 2 and a green, we can search our library for up to 2 basic lands, reveal those cards, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped, and the other into our hand before we shuffle. Doing something very similar is Nissa's Pilgrimage. For 2 and a green, we can search our library for up to 2 basic forests, reveal them, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped, and 1 into our hand, and then shuffle. For 1 white, we can cast Oust. It is a sorcery. We can put target creature into its owner's library second from the top, and then its controller will gain 3 life. And for 2 and 2 blue, we can cast Sleep. We will tap all creatures target player controls, and then those creatures will not untap during that player's next untap step. Next up are our instants. First up is Aetherize. For 3 and a blue, we can return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. And for 3 and 2 blue, we can cast Aether Spouts. For each attacking creature, its owner will put it on the top or bottom of his or her library. In true blue fashion, we can pay 2 blue mana to cast Counter Spell and Counter Target Spell. We also have a Disappearing Act. For 1 and 2 blue, we can cast this to counter target spell, but we must pay the additional cost of returning a permanent we control to our hand. Now we're going to want to be bouncing a lot of creatures. This is just an easy way to counter a spell and then also have the added bonus of putting one of our creatures back into our hand to then cast it, drawing more value from Chulane. And for a white and a blue, we can cast Dovin's Veto. It can't be countered, and we can counter target non-creature spell. And for a green and a blue, we can cast Growth Spiral. We will draw a card, and we can put a land from our hand onto the battlefield, much like Chulane's triggered ability. We can also cast Negate. For 1 and a blue, we can counter target non-creature spell. And for 1 and 2 blue, we can cast a personal favorite of mine, Polymorphous Jest. Each creature target player controls will lose all abilities and become blue 1/1 frogs until end of turn. We also have Tempest of Light. For 2 and 1 white, we can destroy all enchantments at instant speed. And for 2 and 1 blue, we can cast Unwind. We can counter target non-creature spell and then untap up to 3 lands. Helping us draw a ton of value are our 5 enchantments. For a relatively new one, we have Blessed Sanctuary. For 3 and 2 white, it will prevent all non-combat damage that will be dealt to you and creatures you control, and whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, we'll create a 2/2 white unicorn creature token. So that means when we are casting our small creatures, gaining value off of Chulane, we will also be generating these 2/2 unicorn tokens. An absolute beast of a card. For 3 and 2 white, we can cast Cathar's Crusade. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we'll put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. This means whenever a creature we cast enters, or even the tokens we're going to be generating enter, each creature will get a 1/1 counter. Meaning we'll be able to create a very large, very powerful army in a relatively small amount of time to overrun the board. We also have Leyline of Anticipation for 2 and 2 blue. It allows us to cast any cards from our hand as though they had flash. So basically we can cast anything from our deck at instant speed. And for 3 and a green, we can cast Wilderness Reclamation. At the beginning of our end step, we will untap all lands we control. This is perfect because it's going to leave us mana open to use some of our counters to keep our opponents from interacting with our board too heavily. And for 3 and 2 green, we can cast Zendikar's Roil. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we will create a 2/2 green elemental creature token. And this final section is our 36 creatures we have in this deck. Now we have these divided into a few subcategories. These first ones are labeled our bouncers. These are the creatures that will either put themselves back into our hand or put another creature we control back into our hand whenever we cast them. For 1 and a blue, we have Arctic Merfolk. We can kick it by returning a creature we control to its owner's hand. We also have Aviary Mechanic. It will bounce a permanent we control. Same thing for Dream Stalker. For 1 and a blue, we get this 1/5 illusion. For 1 blue, we can cast Faerie Impostor. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we have to sacrifice it unless we return another creature we control to its owner's hand. For 1 and a white, we can cast Jeskai Barricade. This 0/4 wall has Defender and Flash, and whenever it enters, we will bounce a target creature we control to its owner's hand. For 1 and a white, we can also cast Kor Skyfisher. Whenever it enters, we will bounce a permanent we control. For 1 and a blue, we can cast Quickling. It has Flash, meaning we can cast it at instant speed, flying, and whenever it enters, we will sacrifice it unless we bounce a creature we control to its owner's hand. One of the real superstars in this deck, Shrieking Drake. For 1 blue mana, we get a 1/1 Drake with flying that whenever it enters the battlefield, we can return a creature we control to its owner's hand. This means we can cast Shrieking Drake and then bounce itself back to our hand with its own ability. They always did say power came with a cost. Trusted Advisor. For 1 blue, we get this 1/2 Human Advisor that will increase our maximum hand size by 2. And at the beginning of our upkeep, we have to return a blue creature we control to its owner's hand. And the last of our bouncers, being 10 in total, we have Whitemane Lion. For 1 and a blue. It has Flash, and whoever enters, we will return a creature we control to its owner's hand. Our next section of 4 creatures are our dorks. So 2 of these are just our simple mana dorks, Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves. They are both 1 green mana, and they can each tap to add 1 green mana to our mana pool. And these next 2 are just 0-cost artifact creatures. We have Memnite and Ornithopter. Both of these we can cast for 0, thus allowing us to get a free trigger off of Chulane's second ability, meaning we can draw a card and play a land down. Now, obviously, with a lot of the bouncing creatures we have, bouncing a 0-cost creature to then immediately cast to generate more value can get out of hand very quickly. And our last section of creatures are going to be our value generators. First up is Arboreal Grazer. For 1 green, whenever it enters the battlefield, we can put a land from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. Giving us some versatility, we have Charming Prince and Knight of Autumn. Both will enter and have multiple modes in which we can select to draw value from these creatures. We also have our token generators, Emeria Angel. Whenever a land enters, we're going to get a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. We have God-Eternal Oketra. Whenever we cast a creature spell, this is going to generate 4/4 black zombie warrior tokens with vigilance. And of course, Rampaging Baloths. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we get a 4/4 green beast creature token. For our artifact hate, we have both Manglehorn and Rexage. Whenever they enter, each one will destroy an artifact. Rexage will destroy an artifact or enchantment. And whenever Manglehorn is on the battlefield, artifacts our opponent's control will enter tapped. Helping us out with some sneaky plays, we have both Frilled Mystic and Mystic Snake. They both pretty much do the exact same thing. They almost cost the exact same amount of mana. Essentially, whenever they enter the battlefield, we can use them to counter target spell. And some pretty basic creatures. We have Elvish Visionary. For 1 and a green, it's going to enter and help us draw a card. We have Loaming Shaman. Whenever it enters, target player will shuffle any number of target cards from their graveyard into their library, meaning in the off chance that we have survived a few board wipes and really want to get some creatures back into our deck to start generating that value engine again, this is a wonderful option for that. We also have Sage Owl. Whenever it enters, we will look at the top 4 and then put them back in any order. And then there's Springbloom Druid. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we can sack a land, and if we do, we can search our library for up to 2 basic lands and then put them onto the battlefield tapped before we shuffle. And we also have the classic Wood Elves. Whenever it comes into play, we can search for a forest and then put it into play before we shuffle our library. Also generating a ton of value and becoming a very imposing threat on the board, Champion of Lambholt. Whenever a creature enters under our control, it's going to get a 1/1 counter. Also, creatures with power less than Champion of Lambholt can't block creatures we control, meaning if we get very lucky and cast a lot of creatures in one turn, thus getting Champion of Lambholt very high in power, our board is essentially unblockable to our opponents, meaning we can swing in and win the game outright or take out some pretty threatening players that might be looking our way. We also have the less good budget option of Craterhoof Behemoth, End-Raze Forerunners. For 8, this 7/7 boar has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and whenever it enters, all creatures we control are going to get +2/+2 Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. And also the budget propaganda version of a creature, we have Forbidding Spirit. Whenever it enters the battlefield, essentially it's going to give us the same propaganda effect, meaning creatures can't attack us or planeswalkers we control unless their controllers pay 2 for each of those creatures. For 3 and 2 blue, we have Guardian of Tazeem. Whenever a lane enters, we can tap down our opponent's creatures, and if it's an island, they will not untap during their controller's next untap step. For 1, a green and a white, we have Renegade Rallier. Whenever it enters the battlefield, if a permanent we control left the battlefield this turn, we can return a target permanent with converted mana cost 2 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. And though not our commander, but definitely a good second in command, we have Tatiova Benthic Druid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we will gain a life and draw a card off of her ability. And our final creature, the most expensive card in the deck, and one in my opinion is the most powerful, Roil Elemental. For 3 and 3 blue, we get a 3/2 elemental with flying. The landfall trigger reads, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain control of target creature for as long as you control Roil Elemental. If we are able to cast this, get it on the battlefield, and find a way to protect it, we can gain control of the board very easily with an explosive turn with Chulane, and then become the pretty much arch enemy of the board, swinging in and killing our opponents with their own creatures. And just like that, we have reached the end of another Commander Deck Tech. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below, let us know what commanders you would like to see us build around in the future. Tell your friends about us, we really appreciate the support.